and welcome to another Tuesday afternoon out to lunch here on WKCR FM in New York, 89.9. On your FM dial, Loren Schoenberg with you. It's 2 minutes after the hour of 12, and once again, I have to get out the red pencil because it's another red letter edition of Out to Lunch this afternoon as we continue with the history of jazz drums with Mel Lewis. And we charge ahead now into Show 7. This is Show 7 of a continuing history of the jazz drums. Today it's looking like Roy Haynes and Philly Joe Jones. Mel is here with us in the studio. We're going to kick off with something from an album done a few years ago live at the Vanguard. This is Thad Jones's The Interloper, and it's the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra. All right. 9 minutes after the hour of 12 o'clock, and it's part 7 of our continuing history of the jazz drums here on WKCR FM in New York, 89.9 on your FM dial. Loren Schoenberg here with my special guest host, Mel Lewis. Welcome back for yet another week.
Oh, it was wonderful to be back.
Yeah. And on the last show, we got into some of the great drummers of jazz. We talked about Tiny Khan and about Art Blakey.
Right.
And I think I had originally announced Roy Haynes at the beginning of that show, but the way it's working out, we're stretching out and we're playing more material. And so we decided to do Roy Haynes today. Again, Roy Haynes and Philly Joe Jones will be our topics, the drummers that we're going to listen today in the continuing history of jazz drums. In case you're just tuning in, Mel's been with us for the last 6 shows, reprising a series that we did several years ago on the history of jazz drums. We began with people like Baby Dodds and Zooey Singleton and Gene Krupa and Chick Webb and Sid Catlett, etc. And now we're working our way up into more contemporary times. We're going to begin with Roy Haynes, and we'll begin with a broadcast that he did with really the one of the first bands that he came to national prominence with, and that, of course, was the Lester Young small group of the late 1940s. And I believe he took the place of Lindell Marshall, who was Wendell Marshall's brother. He joined Lester in December 1947. In fact, I read an interview with Roy Haynes where he said he remembered the first gig he did with Lester was at Town Hall in New York with Sarah Vaughn on the bill. And wouldn't you know that a complete recording of that concert has turned up recently. And fortunately, we can't play it for you because it's in litigation or something like that at the present moment. So we won't hear the very first recordings of Roy Haynes with Lester. He also recorded with Lester for the Aladdin label in late 1947. But we will listen to live material from the Royal Roost. And in selecting the material for the show, Mel has so importantly requested that whenever possible I find live material by the drummers as opposed to studio material. Could you explain why?
Well, because studios have always had a tendency to cause musicians in general, it doesn't matter who they are, to sort of hold back because of that. Of course, you always had a producer in the booth who will stop the tape right in the middle of a great chorus because you squeaked or you made a mistake or you hit a clam, which is sort of stupid. But that's producers, and which most of them, used to be an old joke about an ad in the New York Times for record producers, no experience necessary. So there have been some wonderful ones. Don't get me wrong, but in general, the best producers of good records would be musicians themselves. Deciding on what they think was best for them. And but when that red light goes on in the studio, there's a tendency to be a little cautious. Drummers will hold back. They'll play lighter. They won't play as strong. When they're on a live performance with that audience out there, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
They just say, "Hey, I'm here to play." There might be dancing going on out in front, or it's a nightclub, whatever, with a good audience, and the smoke is there, even though that's terrible too. But it's there, and the drinks, and so on. And after you play your best. You take chances. And that's why I prefer to hear, and drummers especially, will really go nuts on a live date. And they'll really play, especially if they don't know they're being recorded.
Yeah.
And generally they don't. They don't know something's happening, And even if they do know, it's that audience. There's that give and take thing between the audience and the musicians.
Yeah. Right, it's like there's something else to focus on. You're not focusing on the fact that you're in a recording studio and that they're timing it. You're focusing that's a live performance.
Well, you're looking at 4 walls in a recording studio,
right.
And it's just not the same.
So let's go to Roy Haynes right now. He's a very young gentleman from New England, playing with Lester Young. We'll hear Lester Leaps In and Sweet George Brown. So let's remember that these were recorded in late 1948, so we can place them in the proper time frame.
And so once again, ladies and gentlemen, we'll bring you the great Prez, Lester Young and a sextet featuring Jesse Drakes on trumpet, Ted Kelly on trombone, Roy Haynes on drums, Tex Briscoe on bass, and Freddie Jefferson on piano. Bringing to you the sensational, the gentleman of tenor, the great Prez. Lester Young here at the Royal Roost, ladies and gentlemen. And to start things jumping without wasting any more time, here's Lester Young and a record that everybody asks for. Lester leaps in. Right now,
Yeah. Yeah, you know what's nice about that for me is that I met Roy, Mr. Loy. I call him Mr. Loy, by the way. We're very good friends, Roy and I, and as I am with everybody else too. But I mean, Roy and I got a special thing. We went to Japan together in 1970 for George Wean's drum festival. He and I and Jack DeJohnette, and we had a lot of fun. And so I started calling him. To this day, I call him Mr. Loy. Could be well, all the Japanese, you know, they don't pronounce their R's too well, and they were
Roy
calling him
Haynes.
Mr. Loy. Oh, he was Mr. Loy, and I was or Loy, and I was Meruis, and he calls me that. So it's a remembrance of the great times we had. Again, I'm chewing on butterscotch, folks. I'm you know, keeps the
He's chewing on butterscotch.
it keeps you dry. It keeps you from being dry when you're talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I first met Roy in Baltimore, and he was playing with Prez's group. After I was with Boyd Rayburn's band then, and after I finished our show, a few of us went down to catch them, and I forget the name of the place. Roy would probably remember. It was a bar. They were up on a bar, and he just knocked me out. And Prez sounded so good. And then that night we all hung out, Prez and Roy and me and a couple other people at the hotel because we were all staying. I think we were staying at the same place. I think it was a Hotel Royal or something like that. Anyway.
Loyal.
The Loyal, yeah. Anyway, we got to know each other pretty well, and Roy was the first drummer to let me sit in at Birdland. I mean, I sat in for him one night. He said, yeah, come on up, you know, and Bud Powell was, and Curly Russell, and Zoot, and I think Red Rodney was playing. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was a lot of fun, and he was really nice about things like that, and I've never forgotten that because he had no fear of his own. You're not going to blow him down. He's me. I mean, he had his confidence, and why he didn't become more famous in the 40s than he did, because he was saying a lot. You know, I don't know. I really don't know.
Maybe it was,
I think,
as we'll get into, winding up in the trio behind Sarah Vaughn was marvelous and a great gig for many years, but possibly that kind of would keep you off the jazz lists.
well, I think he took that job because he needed to work, and he had a family, you know, and he wanted to get it going, and working with Sarah, who was great anyway, you know, was a chance for him to know he's going to get that check every week, and at the same time play with somebody who was tasty and good trios and all that. But it cost him. It took him out of the picture for about 5 years. I mean, he was gone from the mainstream jazz scene. You know, he was out working with her, and except for in a festival here or there, or a club in New York once in a while, or in L.A. or someplace. I mean, he was on the road with her, and also, Roy was really the original avant-garde drummer. I mean, even if you notice what he's doing there behind Lester, he's doing the kind of things Max Roach did in Bebop, but stretching it even further, to where he's crossing with that bass drum. Man, he's crossing some bars, and that's nervy and good. A lot of musicians, I don't think a lot of horn players, Prez with his swing could appreciate it. It was inspiring. But I think there's a lot of people around that didn't know what was happening and would get lost and things like that. And, you know, Roy was, man, this is me and this is what I want to do. And to me, it was, I loved it, you know. And I think he was doing what Elvin did later on, way before, you know. I mean, he was really into some things. And, but again, when he left that scene and went out with Sarah, which was a security, and it's still a good move. I'd still say he did the right thing because he raised his family and he had, you know, he didn't live like a human being. So he had to be doing something right there, and he certainly didn't lose anything in his playing through the years. It's just that we didn't get to hear him so often with playing with the Beboppers, which is where he should have really been. Yeah. But he went on and maintained his integrity, and to this day, I mean, Roy has always been a sharp dresser. He's always a gentleman. You know, he's a nice cat. I really like him.
It's 12:27. We're talking with Mel Lewis here on the history of jazz drums. We're getting into Roy Haynes. We just heard some early Roy Haynes, 1948. Let's listen to some more titles recorded in the interim between when he was with Lester Young and then the years with Charlie Parker before going out with Sarah Vaughn in the 1950s. And we also will hear some beautiful things with Sarah Vaughn. This is the next sessions from January 1951, the Miles Davis Sextet. And the band here is Sonny Rollins on tenor, Benny Green trombone, John Lewis on piano, Percy Heath on the bass, and Roy Haynes on the drums. And this is something really far out. It's an original by John Lewis. And can't think of anyone else who could have played it like this except Roy Haynes. This is called Morpheus, and we'll follow it with a trio with Al Haig on the piano. And we just heard Roy Haynes in 3 settings. The first one with very avant-garde for its day. It still sounds very fresh. Morpheus, written by John Lewis, recorded by Miles Davis in 1951. Sonny Rollins, Benny Green, John Lewis, Percy Heath, and Roy Haynes on that. And we followed that with a trio just to hear some nice brushwork from Roy, along with Tommy Potter and Al Haig. And we heard, I believe that was Stairway to the Stars from 1950. And then we concluded there with Charlie Parker and Roy Haynes in 1954, I Get a Kick Out of You. Mel Lewis.
But that you know, now that was a nice way. It was a nice medley of tunes to show 3 sides of Roy. You know, knocked me out on the. I mean, the brushwork on the trio was just simple, straight ahead, tasty, nice sound, nice feel, which is what it should be. I mean, a man knows how to play brushes, and then on this last piece with Bird, you know, it's like the first chorus, hi-hat, you know, which is all the great drummers did that. Always the first chorus is hi-hat. That's the way it's supposed to be, you know. Then you go to your ride cymbal, and you'll notice that on the ride cymbal, there's an emphasis on 1 and 3. Da 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 da. 1, 3, 1, 3. That's it. That's where the swing comes from. You know, I mean, the whole thing is just going down that way, and because the 2 and the 4, the hi-hat's there for 2 and 4. I mean, there's enough, but 1 and 3, there's never enough unless you play it, and you got to do that on the top cymbal, and he did it. Then he gets that nice sound on his drums. They're tuned beautifully. You know, on that tour to Japan, Roy he carried a timpani, a tunable. He carried a small timpani instead of a big tom-tom. He had a timpani on the right-hand side with that he did. Oh, he did all kinds of things with it, with his hand. He could all kinds of glisses and all that. It had a hand, whatever you call it, like a ratchet type of thing, you know. And it was a small timp, you know, about maybe 20 inches, 18 or 20 inch timpani, and attached to his regular set of drums, his lovely drums, and he did some wonderful things in his solos. And I had a normal set, and DeJohnette had a pedal timpani. I mean, a pedal tom-tom that he was doing his things with. But watching Roy go with the hand, he had a great range on the drum with that anyway. And it was always, we had a lot of fun. The only thing about that trip was very funny is that there was a Japanese drummer on the bill with us, George Otsuka was his name. And this was a 2-week tour. Now, every night, the show always started with George. He was first. And then I would be second, and I used members of Roy's group. I used, who the heck was there? Benny, tenor player. Benny, he was very good. Played baritone. He played tenor and bass clarinet. Benny Maupin. I used him. He'd come out, because they'd come out and play solo with me. And Charles Sullivan, and bass player was Vishnu. Yeah, Bill Woods, but Vishnu was new name. And we had a ball. I mean, you know, Roy used them, and actually it was his own group, the hip ensemble. I used them individually because Jack, he came out and did something too with Benny Maupin with the flute and all that. You know, pretty wild stuff. But all of a sudden, one day, we're standing in the wings, and we hear George and
George Wein?
No, George Otsuka. It was the George Wein tour. We hear George Otsuka, or Otsuka, I guess it is. And all of a sudden, I hear my solo, my everything. I mean, and the next night, we hear Roy. And then we hear Jack DeJohnette. This guy got all of us down, pat. And he was using our scene, so we had to go up there and change everything. Oh. he created the thing where we had to create something new. It was really funny. It was like, well, who's he going to be tonight?
Yeah.
And that was a funny situation. That was in 70. In 1962, Roy and I were tied for first place. We both won the Downbeat Critics Award. In fact, we used to laugh about it because I was already like 33 years old, and he was 34, something like that. It took us all that time for us to win a New Star Critics Award. You believe that?
with all the recordings and
With all
experience by that time.
I mean, and everything he had done, everything I had
Yeah.
done already, you know, and we're just being acknowledged as new stars, you know.
Kind of ironic.
Yeah, it was.
What did you think of that first recording, the one with Miles with the cymbal at the beginning? And
Oh, I
the-
like it. That was that was very inventive, very creative at the
Yeah.
time, you know. Well, Roy was a creative drummer in the early days. I still think that's what killed him a little bit because he was too creative. He was ahead of his time, you know.
Why don't we go now just to some more recordings of Roy Haynes in the 50s. This is during the years he was with Sarah Vaughn, and Sarah made some great records for MRC. And this is from one of them with Clifford Brown, Paul Quinichette, Jimmy Jones, Joe Benjamin, Roy Haynes, and Herbie Mann. And we'll hear, let's see. Oh, yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's called You're Not the Kind. And again, we just get to hear Roy here within a more, in a different context.
Mhm.
It's with a singer, and it's a different context than with a bebop quintet like we just heard him with Charlie Parker. But yet he gets his licks in. So we'll listen to Roy Haynes with Sarah Vaughn and Clifford Brown, 1954.
You're not the kind of a boy for a girl like me. I'm just a song and a dance, you're a symphony. I thought that you never would doubt me, but I'm telling you, you'd be much better off without me. You're just the kind of a boy who would always play fair. I'm just the kind of a girl who would never be fair. It's so hard to let you go, but it's only because I know that you're not the kind of a boy for a girl like me. girl like me. I'm just a song and a dance, you're a symphony. I thought that you never would doubt me, but I'm telling you, you'd be much better off without me. You're just the kind of a boy who will always play fair. I'm just the kind of a girl who would never be square. It's so hard to let you go, but it's only because I know that you're not the kind of a boy